everybody, all my family. We're here to dedicate a park called the Morrison Park in memory of my brother Squib and his wife Pat. Today is September 5th. I'm happy to see all my family here.
Thank you very much for coming today. My name is Gary Reese. I'm the village president, and on behalf of the village, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Morrison Park dedication. We're going to open our ceremonies today with the presentation of colors from our Cub Scout pack. Would you all rise, please?
She was trying.
Color guards, present color. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
post color. Color guard dismissed.
Thank you very much for the presentation of those colors from the Cub Scout pack. We have an agenda today. I didn't get all of them passed out. Well, I don't know whether all of you need one of these or not, but there's some up here. I think the first thing that on the agenda for today is the presentation from the Lakemore Scouts drill team that used to be around before. Are any of those members here?
We sure are. We're all over.
What did you guys have in mind for today?
Nothing, we're just...
No.
Wait a second. Why don't you go to one of your drills? Why don't they go forward? Get it together.
I heard that you guys have been practicing all week.
Who told you that?
No?
Well, at least have them all stand up.
Okay.
Yeah, get them up to the front. Right here.
Would you guys stand up so we can give you a good hand, please? Next, I think we'll go to the speakers. We have a couple of speakers today, Mr. Larry Booster and Terry, I believe is, where's Terry? Okay, Terry. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Booster as our first speaker for this afternoon.
I don't know, can all of you hear me without use of that mic or not?
Yeah.
Can't, why, just say so. Members of the village board, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. You know, when I got a letter from President Reeks asking me to say something today, I thought, well, what can I say that would be of interest? And then I thought, well, you know, Lakemore was a lot different back about 45 years ago than it is today. and maybe a lot of people are not aware of what it was at that time. I came out here in 1947, and the Morrisons, I think, came about the same year. I'm not sure whether that's the same year or the year before or after. I opened up across the street where the Holtz Motor is now. I came out looking for a business, having been out of the service about a year and a half, and I found a place that, after all, there were 7 taverns along here. At least one place selling a cup of coffee and a Coke and a sandwich and some ice cream could make a living. And I opened up the Charm House at that time. I became friends with Norm and Pat about that same time also. You know, when we came out here at that time, this community, like McHenry, Johnsburg, was an old community, and everybody there had been born and raised in the community. And we were considered foreigners, more or less, and they let us go so. As a matter of fact, I spoke of the taverns. One fellow up in Woodstock one time said to me, when I told him where he lived, oh, he said, "You mean Whiskey Hill?" I said, "Come on." I said, "The only reason it's called that is because you people are greedy for money and you give all those tavern licenses." But he didn't pay any attention to me anyway. Anyway, we had that time, most of us, when we moved out here, these houses were summer cottages. We had a well. I found out that my well was 25 feet out in the yard, and the line leading into the house was 6 inches underground. I found that out New Year's Day, the first New Year's I spent out there. But anyway, and a septic tank was a 50-gallon drum at that time. In many places, 25 feet of field, and the houses weren't insulated. Of course, we didn't know all of those things. We were out in the city at the time, and naturally we weren't aware of all of this. But anyway, we did get together on things, and eventually we decided that possibly we should start a fire department. Well, that was started back in about 1951, if I recall right. Stella Blades and myself, we each sold a lot over here across the street where the village hall is now, and we held carnivals, we held raffles, we held bingos, we held bake sales, dances, I don't know, you name it, to raise funds. That building was built entirely with volunteer labor and funds that were gathered from all of these various activities. Also, about the same time after that got going, the clubs that had been furnishing the road upkeep and picking up our garbage were getting to the point where they could no longer handle this sort of thing. There just wasn't enough money. So incorporation was talked of. And in the fall of '51, we held a meeting, and that time it was not only Lily Lake, but Lily Moore, and I think some people from Pritchie's Estates also. But it was decided later on that the people from Lily Moore did not want to be a part of anything like that, so the vote was taken, and a close vote back in 1952, and we were declared a village. But then there were some votes that were supposed to have been no good, and there was some arguments about that, so it was a while before we finally, I think it was in, yes, it was, I'm sorry, it was in '51 we declared a village, but it was in '52 before we were finally declared a village. The judge threw out the rest of the things. Over the years now, at that time, Norm was a trustee along with me, with the first group of trustees, and Mr. Claude McDermott, who was instigator in starting the village, was the village president. I don't remember all of the various officers, but they were various ones. We went along then that naturally the various clubs that had been working to keep up the rules and so forth, we asked them to continue because the village didn't have any money for a couple of years. It takes a little while to get on the tax rolls, and then they finally did. By then there was some money available. And various people, and I see some of the people here today that were very active in those organizations. But that finally came down to where we were finally, after being declared village, getting going for a few years, things started to ease up a bit. About the same time, I can't just remember when, but anyway, we decided that we should have some representation on the school board. So I ran for the school board. There was also another person, a lady from the McHenry area who was not born and raised in McHenry that was also running with me, and somehow or other the word got out that if the two of us got elected, why the buses would no longer pick up or take the children to the parochial schools. Well, we got soundly beaten. As a matter of fact, they had one of the biggest school board elections they ever had. They had people in wheelchairs and any way at all they could get to the polls to vote that time, so they made sure about it. So you see, McHenry was still not entirely free of the idea that you had to be born, raised, and lived in McHenry all your life. That was one of the things. Then later on in about 1957, when the election was coming up for village officers, some of us got together, and well, McDermott and I were always friends. We had some disagreements of opinions, and it got to be the point where we decided that maybe we should form another party. So I was selected to be to run for village president. Norm ran as one of the trustees. I don't remember who all the trustees were, but anyway, we got beat. The thing I remember about that the most, though, is that Jim Crine, back in those days, he was one of the trustees that was running. He said that the night of the election, when the results came in, I could still see Jim Crine sitting there and saying, "I can't understand it. I went around to practically every house in the village, and everybody said they were going to vote for me." And so that was one of the things. The other thing I remember about that election, you hear nowadays about anybody being put up for office in Washington, why they do a background check. Well, wait a minute. Lakemore, we started that. I found out one of the people that was on the opposition party came to me after the election and said, say, do you know that you had an uncle that was cashier of a bank that failed in 1932? I looked at this party and I said, so what? Well, I thought you should know about it. Now, the only way they could have found out about that was to run a background check. So, after all, I think Lakemore was way ahead of the times in that particular instance. Then Pat and Norm became interested back in the late 50s concerning marching teams, and they attended a lot of the meets around. And so they decided that Lakemore had a lot of young people at that time that could be kept busy. And so in 1961, they formed a drill team. And that got to be, I just looking at some literature here a while ago, they said better than 50 members. And it continued until about 1964, I guess, when it was finally disbanded because all of you got too big for the participate in those things. Anyway, they were very active in that. At the same time, Pat was also village clerk. At that time, we did not have all of the facilities you have now in the village hall here, and the police phone and also the village phone was in the Morrison home. And I don't know if any of you have a business phone in your home, or any of those of you that are village officials. I'm sure that you know what it is to have a phone in your home where you are before the public, because I don't understand how they ever had a meal where they could sit down and finish the whole meal without being interrupted at least once or twice. Now, Pat had that for a number of years, even while Sunday was born in 1960. Oh, I shouldn't tell her age, but I was 62, and so that was when she had to stay home, and of course that worked out very well. I became village treasurer during that period of about, I guess, 61 to 71, somewhere in there anyway. And Norm, I don't think ran it again, but he was on the zoning board, and then for years he was also building inspector. I think he was that until he passed away, if I'm not mistaken. And so, you know, when I stop and think about it, McDermott started the village, was president, was very active for quite a few years. John Bonder was president, he was a trustee first of all, and then he was president of the village. Richard Hyatt started out as village clerk, and he was also, I guess a short time, was a trustee and village president. And spent a lot of time and energy. But when I think back about it and realize the time and the energy, and also I'm sure there was quite a bit of their own money spent, as Norm and Pat did, I think that the village board was very wise, and no one prior to this had put in the amount of time and the energy, and they certainly deserve the honor of that's being bestowed on them today by having this area named after them. Thank you.
We all certainly owe a lot to everyone that had the foresight to do some of those things that we now have in our village at this time. Let's see, next speaker would be Terry.
I'm going to use the microphone, and I'm not as good on my feet as Uncle Larry, so I have prepared a few notes. Just a few. It won't take so long, and you'll probably bust me up anyway, so here goes. It's an honor, really, to be standing in front of you on behalf of my mother, my father, my sisters. I was going through some old photographs shortly after my dad passed away. And when I found out that the park was going to be dedicated, I started going through them and seeing if I could find anything. And I found a picture of my father giving a speech. I don't know in front of whom, because it was taken as he was standing in front of the foundation to the firehouse. And I later learned that that was the dedication of the firehouse, and that was a groundbreaking. So I think it's kind of ironic that I'm standing here thanking you for recognizing one of the things he did, and many more things to come. That was 40 years ago, and today I have the privilege to brag about my folks.
Gary, I was out here the day they dedicated the fire.
Thanks, Grandma. I want to officially thank members of the current board, past President Ed Gott, and current President Gary Reeks for making this whole thing possible. I think it's really a great thing. And when I came down to look at what had been done to the little beach, as we called it, I'm just amazed. I want to thank PJ, wherever she is, for doing such a great job in listing all of the accomplishments of my mother. Back then, I really didn't pay much attention to the offices that she held or the things that they were doing. I was busy having fun with everybody else. Going through the house the last week with my wife Vicki was difficult, but I did raise quite a few childhood memories. I want to share a little perspective with you of what it was like growing up in the Morrison household during those years that I was out having fun. When my parents came here in 1948, this was known as Lily Lake, as Mr. Booster said, and nothing was incorporated, and I can remember that there were 70 residents in the village. And I know that because everything was discussed at our kitchen table. In the 1960s, I remember the sign that said population 700. That was what we were, right? When my mother first became clerk, our house was the office. That meant every new resident had to come into the house and get registered, get all kinds of information about vehicle stickers. You know, we sold those and dog tags, and the good news is that we knew everybody in the town. Bad news is that we knew everybody in the town. And it would always happen at dinner time. I mean, that was just a way of life. People would come over and you'd never know who they were or what they wanted. They'd just drop over, you know. We'd be sitting in the kitchen table and there's a car coming. Well, who are those people? Gee, I don't know. Okay. And my mom did a fabulous job. I didn't really realize until much later in life, but just, you know, doing her business in the house, and the kids had to go into their bedrooms, or we had to stay in the kitchen, or whatever it was, and that was just a way of life. The Lakemore Police, I mean, they treated our house like it was theirs. And I remember having a party once, and I think I wasn't driving yet, I was probably 15. That was the magic age when everybody thought that they should be driving, so they found some party to go to. And we're sitting there having a good time and drinking a little bit, and cop car shows up in front of the house, and I'm telling you what, I didn't get a chance to tell anybody that this was going to happen, and I'm just nonchalant about it. And they couldn't believe it. I never had another party since.
Terry, what was that parrot's name? That parrot, that squawking parrot you had?
Oh, the parrot, Mr. Bones.
Mr. Ball.
Yeah, he sat on our fridge, and everybody had to come in and see him. Speaking about the Lakemore Police, they always checked in at dinner time, and we had this policeman. His name was Big George Watkins, and I mean, just right in the kitchen, just sit down, and you know, whatever we were eating, we had. But we collected their mail and wrote their paychecks, and every single night of the week, one of them was there, and I just grew up with that, and I really didn't think much of it. As I said, there's a good news, bad news to this. I mean, the good news is you think, okay, you know, I'm going to be taken care of, but, I mean, they knew everything I did.
Yeah.
The first village clerk's phone was in our house, 385-1117. It was sitting right next to our kitchen table. As the village grew and more people came, I mean, that phone was ringing constantly. And my mom had to always be there to pick it up. You know, the kids couldn't answer it. And the first police radio was in our house. And, you know, at first that was a toy for me. But then, I mean, it's like we always had to have it on during dinner. And so our whole dinner conversation was consumed with what was going on in the village. And my responsibility was to not talk about it. And so it was a little tough. You know, you'd hear about things and you just didn't talk about it. And I think some of my old friends that are here would reflect on that and say, yeah, that's right, we really didn't talk about what was going on. I didn't know who was on the board of trustees, and I really didn't care. You know, I just couldn't think about it and talk about it. We were on our own for dinner when village meetings came, and I think this was the second Monday of every month or something like that. And that usually meant eating either my dad's cooking or my sister's cooking, and, you know, oh boy. And afterwards, if it was a real good meeting, I mean, you didn't talk to anybody, and they would come home, and Tuesdays usually weren't real fun. My mom was usually wound tighter than a drum. All of this sounds, you know, bad, but it really wasn't. As I said, we took it in stride. Sometimes it made us feel real special. And I really did feel special when I was at the funeral home last November, and Ed Gott came up to me and told me about this park dedication. I think he had a great plan there. It was perfect timing. It was not only a way in which to get myself and my two sisters together, which has been difficult since I've been living down south for the last 10 years, but it was also a place where it was okay for a grown man to cry. This park, as I said, we called it the Little Beach. It was a real special place for a lot of us. A lot of families, well, we won't talk about what we did, right? But it was a special place. We would go there and not only during the day have a good time, but when the kids were holding hands, walking around the village at night, I mean, that's where we'd end up. It was like our own backyard.
You get kicked out all the time.
Got kicked out sometimes if there were parents around. And you had to know which night the police weren't on duty. Speaking of the other folks in the neighborhood, the families, I really wish the sign could be big enough that could list all of the families that really made this town something. With the way I look at it, my folks really never wanted to be recognized as leaders here. What they did was kind of keep everybody together. But there were a lot of families that would volunteer their time to not only help each other build their houses or fix things, but they would try to get together and do something for the kids. And, you know, one of the things that they did for the kids was put together the Scouts. Not only the Lakemore Scouts, but the Boy Scouts before that, the Cub Scouts. I can remember den mothers and troop leaders and so forth, and they were all parents of the kids. And I know that if I started talking about the names, I'd probably forget somebody, so I won't do that, but those of you who are here, I think you know who I'm talking about. My mother, as some of you may know, was part Filipino, and I've become to realize that Filipinos are such industrious people, and that's partly why my mother just put so much of herself into this. My father was a laboring Irishman. He loved being a good neighbor. He loved pitching in and helping people. Anything to do with construction, believe me, I found it in the house the last 4 days. They gave their hearts and their minds to this town. We implored my mother not to enter the race whenever the elections would come up. There were times when she was sick, she was burning her candle at both ends. We would sit there at the dinner table and say, "Mom, don't do it." And yet she did it. She just loved to see the town grow. Her commitment was exceptional. My dad's support was astounding. Something I never really understood while I was growing up. What my father did with the Lakemore Scouts drill team. It was unbelievable. Not only did this put McHenry County, you know, on the map, but, I mean, everybody just really got into it. We were a bunch of kids. Excuse me. We grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. But we became state champions.
All right.
And you know, that's really something. I mean, it's a thrill that very few people ever really have. And when I met my wife Vicki and I started talking to her about how special that was, you know, she came from a real tiny town too, and she really started to understand what I'm talking about. But at first when we got involved in the Scouts, it was like fun. And then my dad was so serious, he got an ex-Marine DI to help us march. We started saying, "Oh, Jesus." And then we got guns, you know, and we got holsters. And we started saying, well, how far is this thing going to go? You know? But we really put it to them, and we won the state championship. We also won a lot of other things besides that. Lots of trophies, and it was just, you know, one experience after another, every single weekend of the summer. And they put that together, and to this day I really don't I just cannot fathom the kind of effort and energy that went into putting the state championship drill team together when drill teams were unheard of.
Too bad we didn't have a mechanic for our bus stop.
Yeah. And the bus broke down a lot. Hey, that was part of it. So you folks can all reminisce about, you know, the things that we really did. In closing, I would just like to again thank the village officers, all of you who came here today to pay honor to my family as part of this park. Although, as I said, they would humbly say that they didn't deserve this much attention, and that if they were here, they would not want this to happen. I'm glad it has, and I'll proudly accept it on their behalf. So thank you, and when all is said and done, no matter how big or small a town might be, I think there's no greater honor than to have your hometown say that they love you. Thank you very much.
Very well done,
Thank you. Next is Sunday. Say a few words, please.
Well, on behalf of my brothers, he said, and my sister, who regrettably could not be with us today, myself and my family, I would like to personally thank my godfather, Larry Booster, for taking us on a wonderful walk down memory lane of my parents and their lifetime commitment to this community and all of its residents. And I remember all those things that my brother said, and even more. It was, like Terry said, it's too bad that there aren't many other names that could be on that sign, because that's what I remember. To make this real short and sweet, if there was a motto that could go along with my parents, it would be working with the community, for the community. Because that's what they were all about, and that's what this is all about. I remember all the corn roasts and all the families and all the kids getting together to work together, and this is exactly what my parents were all about. And I know that they would be very proud and very honored to see that what they worked for and toward for their lifetime has happened. The park, as my brother said, looking at what it has become, and it was our lifetime. I spent my summers down there. And, excuse me for this, that's what to them it was all about. It was a community of families and kids. This is difficult. But anyway, that's what it was all about to them. It was families, it was the community as a whole, and its residents and their children, and everything they did, even though it was business, somehow the kids always benefited from it, no matter what it was. Bicentennial, all the corn roasts, somehow it was like that was their goal. It was the community and their children in hopes that someone would continue that. And I can see from all their hard work, that's exactly what has been given back to them. There's new families, there's new homes, and there's all kinds of children. And I'm happy and proud to be a part of that and to see it continue. And like my brother said, I'm very proud to have my parents' name put on a plaque on a park that was what my mom worked so hard to see happen. Thank you. Oh, and it was my grandmother who suggested my uncle to speak, so you couldn't have picked a better person.
Thank you very much. At this time, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to take part in dedicating the park, and not only that, but in dedicating a scrapbook and 2 plaques to Terry, if you would come up, please. and Sunday, and Valerie.
Okay.
Plaque reads Morrison Park, dedicated to the citizens of Lakemore in honor of Norm and Pat Morrison, September 5th, 1993.
Thank you.
The only thing left on the agenda now is to adjourn down to the park where we have the sign and the official ribbon cutting ceremony. The park is will be then officially dedicated, and I hope you all have a great time at Lakemore Fest today. Thank you very much.
Let me hold your dollar while you're in there, so you don't lose it. Let me hold your dollar so you don't. Here, give me your dollar.
Oh yeah.
Where am I going?
Yeah, in your shoulder. And you can come in a little if there's not enough room, but don't block your there you go.
There, that's better.
You can stand on it. Wow, the little beach.
Little pig.
I love this beach.
It's very little over there. It's only one.
For hours at a time. Oh, it's tiring to get. Starving.
Okay?
Wait 1 second.
All right.
Here's my big boy Robbie taking movies.
All right.
We'll go to Hollywood.
Yeah. It's pretty out here.
Aunt Jean, get over there.
Come on, Jean.
And then the boys. We have to have some of the boys.
Here. Here. Here you go. All right, there you go.
There.
Aunt Jean. Okay, let's get Timmy and the kids. Robbie and Nancy and everybody. Where's Tim?
They took the tank off.
The first time I was, yeah, because I lived right on the house on the corner as you